My body answered before my mind had a chance to weigh in. I couldn't sleep for 2 nights, and I was completely missing the felt sense of where my energy was most actively alive. Awareness plus choice equals results. And awareness at its deepest isn't a cognitive act. It's the willingness to feel what's actually alive in you. It's not too late. The energy is patient. It's been waiting. Welcome to Magic in the Moment, Mindfulness in Real Time. My name is Clayton Platt, and I'll be your host for this podcast journey. And for many people, practicing mindfulness has very little to do with sitting on a cushion, lighting incense, or even focusing on their breath. Just paying attention to what they're doing at any moment and doing this intentionally can create that same magic. Our time together is intended to share how mindfulness plays out in everyday life for our guests. And before we begin, here's a word from our sponsor, Meditation for Leadership. We all feel it, the pressure to keep up, to perform, to push through. But lasting success doesn't come from speeding up. It comes from slowing down, leaning in, and creating the space to lead from within. That space is where we shift from autopilot to intention, building mindful habits that strengthen focus and calm. It's where we stay connected to our values and purpose, choosing to respond instead of react. It's where we unlock our potential to positively shape our own lives and empower others to grow and thrive. That's the work of Meditation for Leadership. If you're ready to create the space for sustainable success, visit meditationforleadership.org. So the year was 1979. I was 24 years old, 1 year out of college, working at Bankers Trust in New York in what was called Employee Benefit Trust Administration. I was working with nice people. It was steady, but it was about as far from aliveness as I had ever been. Now, I should tell you something about myself that matters for this story. I had grown up loving theater. I had major roles in high school and college productions. I was one of those kids who came alive on stage in a way I didn't quite understand and never thought to examine. I played in rock bands. I loved being in front of people, guiding them through something, taking them somewhere. But I'd majored in economics at an Ivy League college, and I had, as many of us do, quietly accepted the unspoken deal. The performing stuff is a passion, but the career stuff looks like this. So there I was, Bankers Trust, employee benefits. And then I went to a wedding. At that wedding, a friend described what he was doing. He'd gone to Columbia and he was teaching English through a bilingual cultural center called the Centro Colombo Americano. And he told me about the work, the students, the energy in the classroom, the life he was living there, the wonderful energy of the Caleños, the Colombian people. And something happened in me that I can only describe as my body answered before my mind had a chance to weigh in. I couldn't sleep for 2 nights. Not anxious, sleepless nights, alive ones. The kind when you're lying in the dark and your mind keeps returning to the same place, and every time it does, something in your chest gets a little lighter. I just knew that I needed to go. So I called my friend. I asked if there was any possibility of my going down there myself. And within a matter of months, I was in Colombia teaching English to adults and teenagers at the Centro Colombo Americano. And then something else happened. I was introduced to executives at Quaker Oats, a major American multinational with significant operations in Cali, and they were looking for a private English teacher for their employees. I said, yes. And then Colgate-Palmolive came along, and Gillette and AIG. Before long, I was spending half my day teaching 4 hours a day at private corporate classes on top of the work that I did at the Colombo. So think about this for a moment. 1979, I was standing in front of corporate executives in Cali, Colombia, teaching, guiding, holding a room. And I loved every minute of it. I stayed for 2 years. And then I came home, went back into financial services, and then investment management consulting. And here's the part that still amazes me. I never thought seriously about that experience again for the better part of probably 35 years. Now, I don't tell that story to suggest that I made some catastrophic mistake by leaving Colombia or going back into finance. I don't think life very often works that way. We make choices that are available to us. They're shaped by our expectations that we've absorbed, the paths that seem reasonable, the voices, internal and external, that tell us what a career is supposed to look like. But what I've come to understand, with the benefit of a lot of hindsight and a great deal of contemplative practice, is that I wasn't paying attention to the right signal. I was tracking the logical narrative: economics degree, banking career, investment management, progression, blah, blah, blah. And I was completely missing the felt sense of where my energy was most actively alive. My friend Kira Higgs, author, thinker, and consultant, and someone I've had the privilege of having on my podcast, besides being the maid of honor at my wedding, once said something to me that just stopped me. She pointed out that my work as a mindfulness teacher, leadership facilitator, speaker, and podcast is the place where two things I've always loved finally came together: teaching and performing. I didn't need to be a professional performer, actor, musician. I never needed that. I needed a life where those two things could live in the same room. And it took me into my 50s to find that room. Here's what I wanted to say to you clearly. That's okay. It's okay that it took me that long. The energy was patient. It kept showing up in the theater, in the bands, in the corporate classrooms of Kali, in the nonprofit work that touched my heartstrings, even when it didn't quite fit. That energy waited. It didn't go anywhere. But I do wish that I'd known earlier how to listen to it. Dave Evans is a Stanford professor and co-author of a book called Designing Your Life. If you haven't read it, I encourage you to do so. His framework is built around a deceptively simple premise. Energy is data. He has a practice he calls the good time journal. It's the idea of tracking over time which activities leave you feeling energized, engaged, and absorbed versus the ones that leave you feeling drained, flat, or like you've been running on willpower. Not whether that activity is impressive or well compensated or logically consistent with your degree, but whether it leaves you more alive or less alive. Evans calls the process of following those signals wayfinding. I love that, wayfinding. He draws a distinction between a map and a compass. So a map tells you where you plan to go. A compass tells you which direction is true. He makes the argument, and I truly believe he's right, that most of us have been trained to follow the map when what we actually need is to learn to read the compass. The 2 sleepless nights after that wedding, that was the compass. I just didn't have the language for it at the time. Evans also talks about what he calls gravity problems, the assumptions we treat as fixed and immovable that are actually movable if we're willing to examine them. For me, one of those gravity problems was the unexamined belief that a performing life and a professional life were two separate things. That assumption felt like physics, but it wasn't. It was just a story that I accepted without questioning. And I want to be honest, because I think this really matters. Not everybody can find a job or a career that perfectly aligns us where our energy lives. That's a real constraint, and I don't want to minimize it. But, and this is the point I want to land, understanding your energy and knowing what lights you up and why is valuable regardless of whether your current situation can fully accommodate it. Because that self-knowledge shapes everything. How you show up, how you lead, what you bring to the people around you, and where you choose to invest yourself when you do have a choice. Knowing your currency, and that's how I like to think of it, is how you understand the why beneath the what. So let me fast forward now. Through the financial services years, through the move into nonprofit fundraising, starting at the Episcopal Academy, the school that I attended for 12 years as a student, and where I was brought in partly to help alumni navigate the school's proposed move from its long established campus in Marion, Pennsylvania, to a brand new facility yet to be built miles away in the suburbs. That was its own kind of energy work, helping people grieve what they loved and to trust what didn't yet exist. But that's a story for another day. Then through the Philadelphia Zoo and through other nonprofits, through the gradual drift toward corporate training and leadership facilitation. And then at some point, and I can't give you the exact date, because it happened, I guess the way most important recognitions happened, it happened slowly and then all at once. I found myself standing in a room full of corporate leaders, teaching, guiding, holding the room. And something clicked. Not loudly, just quietly, unmistakably. A sense of, oh, this is what that was. This is what the Centro Colombo Americano was. This was what theater was. This is what the bands were. Not the specific form, not the language teaching or the stage or the music, but the quality, the being fully present in front of people, guiding them somewhere, performing and teaching at the same time. 35 years after Kali, the thread had never been gone. The energy had known all along. I've been practicing mindfulness for 25 years. And one of the things that the practice has given me is the concept from the Buddhist traditions called prajna. It's a Sanskrit word that points to a kind of wisdom that arises not from thinking, but from deep receptive attention. It's the knowing that comes before the knowing. It's the signal that registers in the body before the mind is caught up. Neuroscience knows all about this. So that's what those 2 sleepless nights in 1979 were. Prajna. The energy was speaking the only language that had available, the language of the body, of aliveness, of I cannot stop returning to this. So my framework, the one that I come back to again and again in my teaching, is awareness plus choice equals results. And awareness at its deepest isn't a cognitive act. It's the willingness to feel what's actually alive in you, and to let that be the first piece of information before your prefrontal cortex kicks in and you're doing all the analysis, before the strategy, before the question of whether it makes sense. So, what does any of this mean for you? I'm not suggesting that you quit your job or move to Colombia, though if 2 sleepless nights are calling you somewhere, that might be worth paying attention to. What I'm suggesting to you is this. Spend some time this week noticing where your energy is most alive. Not where you think it should be, not where it's most logical or most valued by others, where it actually is. The Dave Evans Good Time Journal is a beautiful practice for this, but you don't need a journal. It's great if you can do it. I recommend it. All you need is just honest attention. Notice what activities leave you feeling more alive than when you started. Noticing what conversations give you the energy rather than take it. Notice what you're doing the last time you lost track of time. And then, and this is the part that requires courage, get curious about what that signal is telling you. Not what it demands of you right now, just what it's telling you about who you are.